Evil existed long before good. I made myself. I cannot be unmade. I am all-powerful.
Why, if that's the case, are you unable to escape from this fortress?
It's a good question. Why have I let the Supreme Being keep me here in the fortress of ultimate darkness?
Because you...
Oh, shut up. I'm speaking rhetorically.
Oh, of course.
I let him keep me here in order to lull him into a false sense of security.
Ah, clever. Clever.
When I have the map, I will be free, and the world will be different, because I have understanding.
Understanding of what, Master?
Of digital watches. And soon I shall have understanding of videocassette recorders and car telephones. And when I have understanding of them, I shall have understanding of computers. And when I have understanding of computers, I shall be the Supreme Being. God isn't interested in technology. He knows nothing of the potential of the microchip or the Silicon Revolution. Look how he spends his time. 43 species of parrots. Nipples for men. Slugs. Slugs! He created slugs. They can't hear, they can't speak, they can't operate machinery. I mean, are we not in the hands of a lunatic? If I were creating a world, I wouldn't mess about with butterflies and daffodils. I would have started with lasers. 8 o'clock, day one. Oh! Sorry.
Happy heresies, and welcome to the desert of the real. So thrilled you've materialized at the virtual Alexandria. And I hope that clip from Terry Gilliam's Time Bandits gives you the proper welcome and context and mood. The film ignited my news as a young teen. Time Bandits is truly a Gnostic gospel for modern times. In fact, our astral guest, Jay Dyer, makes an even better case than I could have on the Gnosticism of Time Bandits in his outstanding new book, Esoteric Hollywood 2. More sex, cults, and symbols in film. I need to write a post on this, but until then, it's so delightful. We'll be discussing Jay's best-selling work on this April, the year of our Demiurge 2019. So it is Happy Heresies, and I hope you know where you are, beyond a cosmic Terry Gilliam flick.
This is blasphemy! This is madness!
Aeon by Gnostic Radio, an initiation by conversation into the dark corners of myth, magic, and meaning. A crash course in cult culture and conspiracy. A virtuous virus invoking and informing history, holiness, and heresy. Each week I, your host Miguel Connor, commandeers your connection to bring the most accepted and rejected scholars and provocateurs to your attention. Fun, compelling, and deeply weird, this is the blow-your-mind cocktail party conversation you always wanted to listen in on. And you deserve to be here, for you are a shining, crazy diamond that should be seen and can ignite the universe with so much wonder.
My father says that almost the whole world is asleep. Everybody you know, everybody you see, everybody you talk to. He says that only a few people are awake, and they live in a state of constant, total amazement.
We're on the quest for gnosis and retrieving the despised philosopher's stone buried in the mud. We're raging against heaven and storming the gates of hell for our misplaced childhoods and paradises lost. We're writing our own gospels and living our own myths.
By the power of truth, I, while living, have conquered the universe.
Beyond all my puffery, what is the climax of gnosis? Well, well, well. As the Orthodox like to claim, it was never to leave the body or just escape the universe in some heaven gates attempt. The goal of the Gnostic was like Paul advises in Romans 12. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. For this, it included liberating art forms and experiences with higher forms of divinity. As April DeConnick writes in The Gnostic New Age, the person inducted into the Gnostic mysteries returned from the shamanistic quest of full spiritual being, a perfected human being who now is empowered to heal the ill, cast out demons, control cosmic forces, and evoke the transcendent. The returning initiates believed that they had walked in the muck of the underworld hells, flown through the cosmic spheres and around the zodiac, and visited the transcendent realm. They had overcome all the forces and gods in the hells and cosmic realms, so that the initiates were liberated from their tyranny. They had come to know the awesome power of their own integrated selves, when their potential divinity was actualized and integrated into their humanity. Quite literally, they had become mortal gods, freed from the perpetual turning of the wheel of incarnation.
Every single man or woman who has stood their ground, everyone who has fought an agent has died. But where they have failed, you will succeed.
Why?
Their strength and their speed are still based in a world that is built on rules. Because of that, they will never be as strong or as fast as you can be.
And by gods, I say, April doesn't mean the creator or managerial gods, but the higher ones of holy, uncreated information and undilated goodness. That's the only way to redeem this universe that at worst is a sadistic prison, and at best a fallen machine mismanaged by angelic union thugs, brimming with their butt slaves in the establishment. I mean, Church Father Irenaeus, the old battle axe as I call him, used to mock the Gnostics for saying that the rain and the waters were the tears of Sophia. She should be crying, forsooth, for in this prison or fallen machine, part of her is trapped with us, under Yaldi Baldi, her tragic bastard son.
Who are you?
I'm the monster's mother.
As mentioned, our astral guest is Jay Dyer, and he'll share some penetrating insights in our interview from his book, Esoteric Hollywood too, and some from his first Esoteric Hollywood. Jay is no friend of the Gnostics, to say the least. And both Esoteric Hollywood works make no bones about this. But I contend that Jay is on the side of light and a true seeker warrior. We don't all have to agree to find our way home.
There's no reason we can't be civil. Is there?
None, sire.
I mean, on this show, I've interviewed Calvinist Presbyterian minister Peter Jones, author of the polemical The Gnostic Empire Strikes Back. I've also hosted Justin Bass, a Baptist minister, and recently Tal Hassig, who is a retired Methodist minister. None of these gentlemen come close to agreeing theologically or philosophically with Gnosticism. But they all provided insights and new dimensions because of their integrity, scholarship, and a thirst of finding what's beyond the sublunar realms. The same goes with Jay and most guests, who I truly appreciate coming to the virtual Alexandria.
It's hard to find the moral high ground when we're all standing in the mud.
In fact, like Alexandria of old, I never wanted the virtual Alexandria to be a platform, but a place of many platforms where all ideas and belief systems got a hearing before Thoth and Isis and Athena and the Logos himself. Ancient Alexandria gave us the Gnostic Sethians and snake-loving Ophites. but also the Desert Fathers and their conservative ideas about rejecting the world. Ancient Alexandria gave birth to the Hermetics, Neoplatonists, alchemists, and Platonizing Jews, but also many robust theologies of Catholicism and Greek Orthodoxy, fueled by the ideas of Athanasius and St. Basil. Ancient Alexandria gave us the sex magic Carpocratians, but also the homophobic and disciplinarian Gnostics behind the Pistis Sophia. Ancient Alexandria was a place of violence and intrigue, the crime scene of Hypatia, and where Simon Magus fought Dositheus to be the true successor of John the Baptist. But ancient Alexandria gave us its library, oh, that library, and its ideas that live on forever and have influenced what is best and hopeful in human history. Ancient Alexandria was and is a place of possibility and potential and imagination, always brimming with magic and mystery.
It was a very special time and place to be a part of, but no explanation. No mix of words or music or memories can touch that sense of knowing that you were there and alive, in that corner of time in the world, whatever it meant. There was madness in any direction, at any hour. You could strike sparks anywhere.
It's my dream that the virtual Alexandria be a small, imperfect fraction of ancient Alexandria. And your company has made it close to being so. But perhaps there is no place in this world for any Alexandria. As the din of censorship, intolerance, and Gorgon political correctness drowns out the voice of the wild mystic and the dangerous philosopher. And yes, the intolerant and intolerable jerk. So it is. While the blue-check digital inquisitors hunt the curious and the meek across hellscapes of groupthink and self-righteousness.
We're all the devil's children. We find what powers the sun and we make bombs of it. We achieve power and we go mad. We always destroy.
And maybe I'm just into some metaphysical Keith Olbermann histrionics. But like the eagle sang in Victim of Love, I could be wrong, but I'm not. Led us to an incredible interview with Jay Dyer, the full part for members and patrons. As a bonus, Vance and I had a post-interview chat on Jay's research and findings, talking about our views on movies and the forces behind them. Many have asked me, who is this mysterious moondog? So additionally, it was an opportunity for the Abraxas Chicken Wing Man to share his captivating story into the esoterica and spiritual hitchhiking. I think you'll enjoy it. And why not some more Time Bandits?
Yes, sir. Yes. I'd like to explain everything. We didn't mean to steal the map. We didn't mean to run away.
What do you mean you didn't mean to steal the map?
It just sort of...
Of course you didn't mean to steal it. I gave it to you, you silly man. And that... Do you really think I didn't know?
Sir?
I had to have some way of testing my handiwork. I think it turned out rather well. And you? Evil turned out rather well. Mm-hmm.
Do you mean you knew what was happening to us all the time?
Well, of course. I am the supreme being. I'm not entirely dim.
Oh, no, sir. We weren't suggesting that, sir. It's just that...
Yes, I let you borrow my map.
You mean you let all those people die? Just to test your creation?
Yes. You really are a clever boy.
Why did they have to die?
You might as well say, why do we have to have evil?
Oh, we wouldn't dream of asking a question like that, sir.
Yes. Why do we have to have evil?
Ah. I think it's something to do with free will.
This is the AM Bite interview, and with us we definitely have the honor and the pleasure of having Jay Dyer, who is here to discuss his book, Esoteric Hollywood 2, More Sex, Cults, and Symbols in Film. How you doing, Jay?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Honored to be here.
The pleasure is all ours. Like I said, I've been following your work for years. I think what you're doing is very important and very eye-opening. And, I can't stress I love what you're doing, so it's great.
Well, thanks.
And with us, we've got the Moondog himself, Vance. How you doing, Vance?
Okay, just flew in from beautiful downtown Santa Maria to appear here.
Oh, there you go. The weather must be nicer than out here in Chicago. But anyway, so Jay, again, your book was, I loved your book. I was actually surprised. I looked, it's 522 pages, and I just sat down and I read it in just a few sessions. It was a real page turner, and I felt this was more intense than your first book, Esoteric Hollywood. And I was, ironically, because you talk about this in your second book, I was like, this is like Jay's Godfather 2 to his Godfather.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I knew I was going to have to up my game to try to not disappoint, people who enjoyed the first book. So I appreciate that. Did you read the Kindle? Because is that why it was so many pages? Because I think the print copy is not too daunting. I think it only comes out to about 83 or so.
Yeah, I did read the Kindle.
Okay.
So, but still, I mean, I have 2 jobs, 3 small children. For me to read a book in less than 2 days, it was a real page turner.
I'm honored. Yeah, I had to. Yeah, I took a different approach. We switched over to topical as opposed to directors in part 1. Of course, part 1, as you know, was Kubrick and Spielberg, Hitchcock, David Lynch, and then in part 2, it was switched to Mafia and MK Ultra and weather control, weather modification, and transhumanism. So a little bit of different approach, but glad I could pull it off. Glad you enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah, enjoyed it a lot. I think, I can't stress enough. People should really get it. Again, it's a great read. And, because it's fascinating for the audience. You're just not going to get the sort of, let's decipher the movies, the symbols, but you get a lot of, politics, spirituality, conspiracy theories. It's all tied in. And it's a hard read at sometimes. It is dark, dark, dark. Sometimes I wonder, how is Jay keeping his sanity, researching this all throughout his years in different places? I read your blog too, and I think, it's got to be 2 things. It's got to be your faith and your sense of humor, right?
I would say so. Yeah, those definitely play into it. That's a good question. And you do go through dark periods. I think Patrick Henningsen said a long time ago that when you first encounter a lot of this stuff and you start waking up, it is a kind of a mourning process. It's like a grieving phase that you go through. Like if you're going through a funeral or something, and like the old you is kind of dying, the way that you view the world when you were kind of hooked in the matrix, and that has to kind of die away, and you got to kind of, wake up to what's really going on. And that's really what I wanted to do with these books, is just kind of use it as a vehicle. We've lost touch with classical education and the arts and modernity. And everybody loves music and movies still. That's kind of one of the last areas. And even that's kind of dying away. The old studio style system as everything transitions to Netflix and streaming. So yeah, I just wanted a way to combine everything, because everything is connected. We tend to see it as disjointed and just kind of its own little niche or its own little box. But yes, everything is connected. And then that's certainly what I was going for, was to try to read film, read the reality between the lines, in these scripts and these screenplays and what's really going on, and tie it all together through film.
And speaking of the humor thing, it does help when you're reading this dark material that you're showing. But there was like one passage in your book, I was laughing out loud. Of course, I didn't tell my wife what it was because she'd get mad at me. But you're talking about how the movie Clue, which is in your book, and you talk about how it's one of the rare board games that get made into a movie. But then you say there's another one, and that's how Hungry Hungry Hippo got made into Designing Women. And I lost it. I was like, it just killed me. I know you'd like it, man.
I wanted to to make it kind of lighthearted. So there weren't any silly chapters in part one. There was a couple that were a little tongue in cheek, but they were still fairly serious. And even the Clue one and the Point Break one, they're halfway serious, but they're also pretty ridiculous. So I just kind of was in a mood, I think, in this one to add more goofy stuff because the second installment was going to be more grounded in real world mafia type stuff. The first chapters deal with mafia and terror, and that's a little more serious than, I don't know, maybe not. It's a little more real world, I guess you could say, and some of the aspects of the esoteric stuff that I dealt with in part one with like Kubrick and things like that tends to be very out there and kind of, we're speculating about alchemy over the aeons and what was Kubrick trying to say with 2001 and all that kind of stuff. And here we're a little more grounded where we're talking about that mafia and history of Hollywood, and then we're talking about the actual running of intelligence operatives and how that's portrayed in film and how it's kind of a deception the way it's portrayed in film. And so I just had to break up the monotony of the seriousness, yes, with the absurdity. And so in many ways, part two is, I guess, a better reflection of who I am, because I'm not just this, sort of morose, macabre figure who's always obsessed with dark stuff.
Yes, and also, I mean, I don't know if this is, again, it's one of those where I don't know if I'm laughing like ha-ha or ha-ha sad, because you even start with, in the book.
I didn't even remember that joke. That's funny.
There's plenty of others that I wrote down too, which I can bring up, but for some reason, I guess we're just two Gen X goofballs before the politically correct days. We just, that kind of stuff sometimes gets me, but again, I can't do that in front of my family these days, because even the kids, but I get in trouble.
Delta Burke?
I'm sorry?
Are you married to Delta Burke? Is that one? I'm just
Stop. But also, I mean, again, another sad, sad part is that you even talked that there, and you, of course, you cited, but there was actually a Mormon mafia. For a second, I thought this was like, I thought they only dealt with Plan 9 of outer space, but there is a Mormon mafia.
Yeah, I mean, most religious groups will have some sort of enforcement arm of some kind, and the Mormon section of this has oftentimes tied into things like the CIA. The CIA has recruited a lot of people out of Mormonism because of their kind of do-good moral type approach, and because of their missionary trips and stuff like that. That makes them kind of ideal for that. I don't think that's too secret. I think a lot of people are aware of that. But specifically in the book, it was in reference to Howard Hughes and his bodyguards, if I recall. They were the ones that were connected to pretty powerful Mormon groups.
Yeah, to me it was eye-opening. So can we say, as you write, CIA and Hollywood are two sides of the same coin. Can we say that Hollywood was basically compromised from the very beginning and weaponized?
More or less, yeah. More or less, yes, I would say that. That's a correct statement, an accurate assessment. I mean, there's definitely nuance. There's definitely different mafias that did play different roles in Hollywood. It's not just the Jewish mafia, but other mafias too played a role. One of the biggest studios was owned by, RKO, that was owned by Rockefellers, and then later by Joe Kennedy for a period. And then I want to say Howard Hughes had a role in that too at one point. But anyway, so different players. And yeah, I would say that the intention, though, of manipulating the arts for the purpose of social engineering has been known for a long, long, long time. All the way back to the ancient world, you could find versions of that. Ancient Egypt, you see this even in the writings of how the pharaohs viewed the masses and things like that. And so a lot of the religious pageants and ceremonies of the ancient world, Babylonians, right? I mean, that this kind of was a form of social engineering and essentially training the masses to see Pharaoh as God or something like this. We can trace that through all the world empires. The Romans did the same type of stuff with Caesar. So it's a technology, you could say, that's been known for a long time, but really in the 20th century it becomes scientifically specified. Studies begin to be done on it. And from the inception of the camera, as we always point out, they knew that they could weaponize that for great use. And so different nations have done that over the 20th century for sure. But I would say that overall, Hollywood was kind of what it was to engineer the West. And then now what they're doing is kind of expanding the model of Hollywood as a tool to engineer other cultures. And that's so you get Bollywood, which is a kind of, facsimile of the style of Hollywood tailored to that people group, and it's used to socially engineer that people group. And you're going to see now we see K-pop, right? Korean pop that's there to engineer the Koreans. And so it's a global model that they're spreading out everywhere. But I would say, yeah, roughly speaking, entities like the Royal Society did make decisions a long time ago that Hollywood would be kind of the test bed for that level of social engineering.
And it is deep. I mean, I have something I call the Jay Dyer dystopia, and I am serious here. I think it's chilling and it has merit. Mm-hmm. And I always picture in my head this sort of massive smart cities coming out where we live in our little macro apartments, and we eat like Soylent or some sort of vegan carbohydrate junk, and we get paid and we have menial jobs, and they sort of test
credits. You get some credits on your
right
RFID chip every month or something.
Right, and we're just there to be data mined or some sort of experimented upon, and then outside it might be like Logan's Run. They say you can't go out there, but the lands are pristine and they're there for the elite, and of course they're doing their demonic aeon summoning rituals and so forth. So am I close to this being your dystopia and a possible one?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what a lot of the artwork of the 20th century has presaged, and I do believe artwork has the ability to be prophetic. We see that with Dostoevsky in the Possessed, his novel Demons, as it's sometimes called. There's plenty of other examples in history where artwork was actually fairly prophetic, and I think that the 20th century's art, whether it's Orwell, Huxley, The Giver, all these different kind of dystopian sci-fi novels, and what's reflected in Hollywood as well, which a lot of that just comes from, those sci-fi novels, THX and stuff like that. It's all kind of giving us the same rough outline, and I think it is in a way prophetic. Yes, that's what's at least the intention of our global elite. To how far they'll get with that, how successful remains to be seen, but certainly, one of the things I talk about is my globalism book series, and we go through the writings of the globalists themselves, and a lot of what they said they would do 100 years ago is coming to fruition now. So, yeah, there's no doubt that even though it's satire, when I talk about living inside Target and you live inside like you live in a drawer, like you sleep in a drawer that's in an aisle of a Target or something. I mean, that's probably not too far from what's in mind, if you're allowed to live, because eventually the idea is to completely remove natural birth and to essentially have it done through a test tube, quite literally. That's H.G. Wells, Huxley. They all talked about that long time ago. And what I'm reading now actually is I branched out into Julian. Of course, he's the one who termed transhumanism, but we've covered Aldous, but we haven't really branched out into Julian. So right now I'm in the midst of two different Julian Huxley books, and that's what we get here. We get all the same ideas. What we start to notice is that whether it's 100 years ago, maybe even 200 years ago, if you go into the French technocrats, the Saint Simon, Saint Just, these characters who kind of foresaw technocracy. They may not have known about babies in test tubes, but they prepared the way for the Huxleys and the H.G. Wells types who would then say, yes, let's have the babies made in test tubes, and let's not even have normal sexual relations or whatever. It's a complete revolution, and that's really what we get in Huxley's, not just Brave New World, but Julian Huxley's On Living in a Revolution, where he's essentially talking about how the 20th century is the finale, the climax of all of the revolutions of the centuries prior, back to the Enlightenment, Protestant Reformation, Scientific Revolution, French Revolution, American Revolution, the revolutions of the 1800s, the Masonic revolutions. These are all sort of preparing the way for what these, and again, these Huxleys are high level, British Royal Society, founders of the UN, founders of UNESCO. This is what they're saying it is, right? So it's not a conspiracy when it's all written publicly in all their books.
Oh, for sure. And then I guess I wanted to ask you the second question for the audience that might not know, and they definitely need to know because this ties in or it appears in all your works, and that's predictive programming. But before you answer that, you were talking about like Huxley and Orwell and all these guys, and there are individuals like, let's say, Jan Irving or Joe Atwell. They say that these are not any of these writers, it's not prophecy. It's a sort of satire. We're mocking you. We're throwing it out there. The plan's already been done. Kind of like in V for Vendetta when the guy says, I already killed you. It's one of those things. Do you think that has any merit, or what's your take, Jay?
I do. I'll be a little more precise. I'm not saying that in the case of every one of these science fiction writers or dystopian writers that it was all just a kind of creative impulse of prophetic insight that they had. I'm saying that the arts can be at times prophetic. So I gave the example of Dostoevsky, and The Possessed, I think, was written 20 or 30 years before the revolutions, the 1914, revolution of the Bolsheviks, and then the later mass deaths, for example, like in Russia, the martyrs and all that, and that would lead to millions dead. And what the reason I was saying that's prophetic is you get this statement that one of the socialist characters in the novel Possessed says that he will bring perfect utopian socialism on a mountain of, I don't know, I think he says 100 million skulls.
Wow.
And then, we have like 60 or people debate the number of how many were killed in Russia. But yeah, so that's, I think, a pretty strong example. There's another. There are other kind of sort of unique specimens of where the arts seem to have predicted this. But I don't think that anybody could have known, in Dostoevsky's day, 20, 30 years before those events, that there would be that many millions of people presumably killed. So I think that's a pretty strong example of this kind of thing. But yes, to be more precise, in the case of a lot of the 20th century characters, like Julian or Aldous or Bertrand Russell or H.G. Wells, these guys that are writing the fiction. No, it's because they knew about the plan. You're absolutely right. And they were, I think, doing a kind of predictive programming. And that's just simply a kind of a strategy or a technique of how to do multiple things. It's kind of like psychological warfare on a basic level. It's a kind of gaslighting. It's a kind of showing ahead of time what you're going to do to condition the people to accept it is I think what it's most simply used for. And there have been actually, academic and kind of psychological warfare level guys in military that have written on this kind of a thing. So it's not just mere speculation. There might be speculation involved when we're trying to pick out specific cases of when it's done. But the idea itself, I would say, is fairly well established, especially when you have even characters like Michael Aquino, who, openly writes about referring his esoteric, left-hand dark path approach to the occult, applying all those, quote, secrets to psychological warfare. He's very open about that. And other people could be listed as well who make a clear connection between psychological warfare and these kind of gaslighting and voodoo, even you could say, techniques. I mean, even drug warfare, you could look at that as arising out of the studies of entheogens and hallucinogens and all that kind of stuff, and that goes directly into military the tactics of biochemical warfare. From studying drugs, studying plants. Everybody's familiar with like these pretty viral videos that have come out about scopolamine and these different drugs that kind of make you completely acquiesce to whatever somebody says. So in other words, it all ties, once again, it all ties in together. Everything's all related. And yes, I would say it's pretty easy to, if you start looking into this stuff, it's pretty easy to demonstrate that predictive programming is a real technique.
So maybe on a more simpler level, and you write about this in your book, we could say something like True Lies by James Cameron or Iron Man, the movie, is to help us get us to learn or deal with the trope of bad Muslim, or Top Gun is to get us to love the government and forget about Vietnam.
Yeah, I think there's ways you could look at it just on a simple level of maybe if you don't know about all the esoteric stuff, somebody could just look at the way the Pentagon interfaces with Hollywood for recruitment films. I mean, they've been doing this all the way back to, well, ever since there have been cameras and wars. They've been making recruitment films. And that's why I kind of started with talking about Howard Hughes in the book and his movie, Hell's Angels, these old 20s movies that were the blockbusters of their day. And he's working hand in hand with the, I don't know, what was it, Department of War at the time. They didn't have the Pentagon, but Department of War. And you've got, all throughout the World War II period, just countless war movies, right? Especially after World War II. All of these war movies. And that wasn't just accidental. It wasn't just, we want to, document through the arts this terrible, tragic world war. A lot of that is propaganda. A lot of that is recruitment. And it becomes really pronounced in not just, there's a lot of that in the Cold War for sure too, but it's really pronounced in the 80s because as academics have shown, Reagan actually allotted quite a bit of money to Hollywood to promote, military propaganda. And that's why you see, fairly obvious, notable examples of this throughout the 80s. But even at times it's in movies you wouldn't expect, like Stripes, the Bill Murray comedy, that was the Department of Defense consultation on it. Private Benjamin, I think, with that stupid Goldie Hawn movie, I think it had Pentagon consulting, and certainly, Top Gun, there's no doubt about that. That was a pro-Navy film, Navy SEAL with Charlie Sheen. I mean, there's a whole bunch of these. And then I mentioned Iron Eagle one time or the other day, and somebody was like, Iron Eagle's not promotion to the Air Force because it shows teens like being more competent than the people in the Air Force. And I'm like, well, have you seen Red Dawn? Red Dawn is like a bunch of teens basically fending off the entire Soviet army. And that is undeniably like complete, total Cold War propaganda. It's just completely obvious. So yeah, I mean, there's not a specific, like if you read Operation Hollywood, which covers this by a bunch of academics, they list all the films that had direct consultation, in terms of propaganda, Clear and Present Danger and, some of the Bond films are ones that you would think are pretty obvious. And again, every now and then some that aren't that obvious. And it's not like the Pentagon says, you're going to craft the entire script the way we want. They just simply say, well, if you want to use these, aircraft carriers, we would like you to insert this scene maybe. Put a scene in where, we're promoting recruitment. Put a scene in where, the soldier who gives his life does it for America, something like this. It's not like they completely say, the whole movie has to be rewritten or something like that. But yeah, those are like the easiest ways to kind of establish this. And then later you figure out, so like G.I. Joe, that was completely part of military propaganda. The guy who was involved in that, Friedman, he worked directly with the Army and Mattel. So toy companies are working directly with the Army, working directly with the cartoons.
Fascinating, but I'm sure the lines must get blurry, and I know this probably is $1 million question for you, because, for example, you look at a movie like The Matrix, and there's that famous scene where Neo has his passport that expires on 9/11/2001, and then, for example, you talk a lot about Kubrick, and it seems like, is he trying to, like, is this, how do I say it, a cry for help, a warning, or or is this a prophecy? It must be hard to tell which is which, right?
Yeah, I don't spend too much time debating people's motives just because it's really hard to figure out people's motives. And everybody always says, well, was Kubrick telling the truth? Was he a good guy or was he in on it? And, a lot of people are, throughout their lives, they might have mixed emotions or mixed allegiances. They might, maybe sometimes Kubrick felt like, I'd really like to make a movie to expose this corrupt system. And then maybe at other times he felt like it was pointless and, why not just go along with it? I'll get all these perks. And I just don't go into spending a lot of time trying to figure out people's intentions and motives. But what I do try to focus on is what is decipherable in my view, what I can argue in terms of the symbolism. And if I'm being speculative, I try to point out, I'm speculating here. I don't exactly know if this symbol means X, Y, Z, but here's what it could mean. And, I try to be open and not too fanciful with the claims. I do think that it is, if you watch enough of this stuff, I think that it's very reasonable to think that, yes, the date could be put there because, it could be for multiple reasons. I mean, the person who put it there, maybe the person involved in the set design or something like that, maybe they knew some inside information and they wanted to put that out there, or maybe somebody had studied subliminal stuff, which is very real, and they wanted to, even though your mind registers that, even though it's very small, your mind can still pick up that kind of stuff and register it even without you knowing. So maybe they thought people could be conditioned to this by putting the date in a bunch of movies, which there are, it's a really prominent number too, 911. I mean, that's kind of a, common number. So it's not always easy to know, like, let's put 911 every, come on, that's like calling 911, right? So sometimes the usage is obviously coincidental, and certainly that kind of an example of predictive programming is circumstantial evidence. But there are examples of directors and people who work in intelligence, or people who work in different fields, or people who are into the occult or the esoteric, and they will talk about the fact that they put those things into their artworks. So it's not completely out of the realm of possibility or crazy, but it's also not a thing where you can say, every time there's 911, that means that was, they were planning, they knew about 9/11. You don't know that. So, and I know that from just my own experience of doing this now for a long time. I took a screenshot of something the other day and I put it up, and I was kind of laughing at it. And people were saying, because there was like a timestamp or something that said 33. They were like, you put that up there because it had 33 on there. And I'm like, no, I wasn't even paying attention that the number 33 was in the screenshot. It just happened. But see, now what I'm saying is that you can see how people kind of rush to the extremes of like, yes, I'm going to intentionally take a screenshot with the number 33 in the bottom.
Jay Dyer's a crypto mason. We knew it all along, or something like that. And it's possible it could be spiritual forces. I like to call it synchromysticism, but my wife is Roman Catholic, and she says it's the angels trying to give us warnings. I mean, that's possible too.
I've discussed that many times, that there are, again, just like with Dostoevsky, the way that the arts could be prophetic. It could be from influences not just from some all-pervasive intelligence agency, but from the other realm, and the artist might not know that he's getting that inspiration. I mean, I'm involved. I'm not like a professional artist per se, but I do things that involve creativity in the arts, and anybody who does that knows that inspiration just kind of comes to you, and it's mysterious. We don't really know our train of thoughts, where they come from, where the inspirations of creativity come from, but they come from somewhere, the spiritual realm, I would say. And so, it's entirely possible that you could have prophetic artworks that even the artist didn't know or intentionally cause, himself to know that. Like it came to him. I think so.
I would certainly agree. And another term or concept I think is important if anybody's going to know your work and your books, and that is that of dialectics. Could you tell the audience about why it's important to understand dialectics so we stop being so damn brainwashed?
Exactly. Yeah, it's a good reason a good thing to mention as to why it matters, which is that, this is really a basic principle in philosophy. It could spill over into a lot of other areas of research too. It could relate to the esoteric but one thing I want to say is we need to distinguish it from dialectics in terms of logic and argumentation. So that's kind of a healthy thing where every, for example, interchange or conversation to some degree is dialogical. Right? It's a dialogue. It's an exchange of ideas. There's pros, there's cons. You're going to kind of have a clash at times of ideas. and that's healthy, right? So like when Plato was talking and teaching his students to engage in dialectic, one aspect or one sense of the word is just engaging in conversation and learning through conversation and debate. That's a positive. However, there's another deeper level to this, which is a metaphysical sense given to dialectics. And this is the idea that there are polarizing forces everywhere. When we look out at the world, we see night and day. We see male and female. We see good guy, bad guy. We see this country versus that country, right? We see the heroes versus the villains. We see the terrorists versus the free nations or so. So, and what this is that there's these polarized groups, East versus West, right? Eastern communism versus Western capitalism. And what you notice is that pretty consistently these forces are polarized in some sort of opposition. And that's not to say that in day-to-day life or in the actual world that they aren't in real opposition. I mean, people do fight wars. There are countries that go against one another. Men and women do come against one another. But what's, I think, problematic is the tendency, the metaphysical tendency to exalt that to an absolute status. So because we see day and night, because we see male and female, sometimes philosophers, ancient religion proponents, whatever, have kind of absolutized the principles to see them as always and forever and perpetually in contrast, in tension. And so this is where we get the idea of dialectical tension. Now, setting aside for a moment the question of whether they actually are or are not in dialectical tension, there are clever people who know how to manipulate those dialectics. One great example is that, Caesar talks about the fact that he was not worried about tribes coming against him because all he had to do was stoke up tensions between the tribes for some petty thing. And as long as there was a petty dispute amongst the tribes, he never worried about, his imperium being overthrown by a bunch of tribesmen who probably have more in common than they did, right? And the same idea all the way up through all the empires to the British Empire. The British were masters of this. They would always be able to kind of set one little fiefdom or one little Gulf monarchy against another, or this Arab tribe against another. And then what they did, they were able to, through their imperial politics, maintain control as a very small nation, right? I mean, United Kingdom is very small, but it was able to have essentially almost a worldwide empire because they were masters of this manipulation of dialectics. So that's the socio-political historical version of dialectics. You can see it in things like, in my view, I believe that capitalism and communism are an intentional dialectic. A lot of people, I'm sure, would find that an extreme claim if they are partisans of one or the other side. I believe that the one and the many, in terms of like collectivism and communism, like, we gotta have a giant mass of people versus the anarcho libertarian crowd who's, no, it's just the individual and we're against the collectivists. That's our enemy. These are manipulated dialectics too. And it can go all the way into metaphysical stuff as well, right? Like the fact that there are men and women, that's something that, we have to overcome by transhumanism or something like that. And it's bad to be either a man or a woman, and we need to actually merge into some sort of new Baphomet being or something like this. In my view, all of those things can be weaponized and often are weaponized. And that's why dialectics is so important. In Hollywood, once you kind of are hip to that, you'll notice they use dialectics all the time. I mean, like you said, True Lies was one of the earliest films to have the Arab Terror. It was a blockbuster with the Arab Terror plot in 94, and so this is significantly prior to 9/11.
Yes, and of course, when you study somebody like the Fabians, who we think are just some, champagne socialists, but they will invest in right or left-wing causes to suit their needs.
Yes, this is another imperial tactic. Great movie example. A lot of people weren't big fans of. If you're a Bond fan, a lot of people didn't care for Quantum of Solace. However, Quantum of Solace is very illustrative in terms of the plot because the Mr. Green character who works for this international organization called Spectre, which is, again, very close to, I would say, the way the world is really run by kind of international intelligence elites. This organization has a guy named Mr. Green. Again, the Green movement here, hinted at pretty clearly. And Mr. Green has a pretty revealing kind of bad guy tell-all sequence towards the end, which is classic Bond stuff, where he says, you should know, Mr. Bond, that we work with anyone who will get our ends complete, right? We work with dictators. We work with liberators. We work with the left. We work with the right. He says, we don't care because we are purveyors of power politics, not ideologues. And that's what gives them, or gave them, in the plot, the upper hand. And that's, in the real world, you could argue the global elite, the Bilderberg crew, the Davos crew, that's essentially what they do as well.
Or The Village.
You talking about the Shyamalan movie, The Village?
No, I'm talking about The Prisoner.
Oh, The Prisoner. Yeah, I love The Prisoner. I'm sorry. I was thinking of.
Yeah, I got the gears on you there. No, St. Patrick's Day just passed, and Patrick McGowan was born pretty close to there. And they mentioned very prominently that the organization was international, and
it is, and
so on.
There's that exactly. The chubby guy who's number 6. There's that one episode where he says left.
Oh, Leo
right,
McKern, yeah.
East, west. It's a global village. It doesn't matter.
Right, yeah, that was Leo McKern. He was number 2, right? He was
okay. I'm sorry, number 2. Excuse me.
Yeah, the prime number 2, right? He was in the end of the Fallout too.
Exactly, and so he gives that speech, which I've gone. It's been a while, but I went through him twice in a row because I loved it so much, and hence I included the Prisoner essay in the book. But yeah, and it's not just that sequence where he gives that global village talk, but pretty consistently throughout that whole 17 episode series, you have a revelation. You have the revelation of dialectics there.
Oh, in Arrival, the taxi gal says, "Oh, we're international."
Exactly.
That's just a very clue. What's your take on the whole thing? What do you think the prisoner means?
Well, I go pretty in deep in the essay. I think it kind of refers to British intelligence, but not just British intelligence, because again, it's also a kind of international, almost sort of NSA type of thing.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of an NSA, international surveillance. Again, Illuminati really is the best way you could describe what's depicted there. And I would say, yes, to varying degrees, just like we see in Bond, that exists. I mean, that's what Spectre does. Spectre serves the same function, the same purpose. And so what does it mean? Well, it's hard to say because the ending is a little ambiguous. So they probably wanted you to debate the ending. Is he going crazy? Some people have the theory that, he actually had died a long time ago. And so this is kind of his afterlife type of stuff going on.
Right.
I don't have a set. I think in the essay, if I recall, I discussed the different possibilities and theories. I don't have a set view on it, but I do think that maybe it was trying to convey that if you're trying too hard to solve this puzzle, without keeping in mind kind of the basics of things like dialectics, you won't solve the puzzle, and you won't get out of this puzzle or prison because it is. Again, you know that I'm not a Gnostic, but from a certain vantage point, you could argue that this life is in a way a kind of prison because we are subject to time and death. We don't have the freedom to decide if we want to leave this realm. I guess if you wanted to commit suicide, I guess in a way you could, but
Heaven's Gate.
But yeah, so you could, yeah, right. You could have a kind of Gnostic type of reading. I know McGoohan himself, I think was a Roman Catholic. So
yes.
So he might have seen it in more of kind of like a purgatorial or a this life is a life of testing and you have to go through the trials and tribulations. So yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure I have the definitive answer on the ending of The Prisoner. What do you think?
Thanks.
What do you think?
Oh, me? I could go on for hours. I've seen the series about 23 times. Well, at the Fallout, I think it really is about kind of a personal growth type of thing where he transcends his selfishness in a certain way and his individuality and sees his relationship to the whole, because, that dialectic you were talking about, the individualist versus the collective, the village, definitely collective. And he's definitely the individual, but yeah, but he sees, in the end, they're offering him the keys to the village, the leadership of the village. And, he just decides to bail. Because he doesn't believe in the mores of the village. He doesn't believe in the collective globalist type of thing. Right. And definitely, I think there were some alien implications there. The tech was beyond what ordinary, ordinary things. Yeah. So I don't know. And
so,
of course,
perhaps almost like maybe that system was run by a kind of archon or something.
Yeah.
Beyond here now that we don't understand.
Yeah, Rover was kind of definitely an alien type of thing. And in the end, they had the nuclear missiles going up and so forth. So he was making a little statement about our own annihilation. And Pop, protect other people. There was a whole thing about that. One of the alternate episodes of The Chimes of Big Ben, at the end, there's a picture of the Earth and a galaxy, and all of a sudden this big red thing comes up and says Pop. So definitely they were trying to warn us, I think, about what the end game was if this whole thing continued and the village continued with its plans to take the Earth over. Right. That's basically, in a short sentence, what I think is going on.
Good take, man.
That makes sense.
Yes, indeed. Agreed.
You know what? I may revisit it because it's been a while, and it would be great. It would be ripe for a new video. That would be a good one because a lot of people still aren't familiar with it.
I know, and every time I see it, I see something new in it, and I told you it's more than 20 times. About once every other year since the let's see, late 70s, I guess it was.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah, my favorite.
Yeah, reboot wasn't very good though, but.
I did see that, yeah, with Jim Caviezel and Ian McKellen,
Magneto and Jesus. But Jay, speaking of TV shows,
Magnesis.
Speaking of TV shows, and I'm not going to bring in Designing Women. I'll wait till your third book is out so you can break the occult in that one.
The third book will be just 400 pages on Designing Women. We'll go through every episode. And
every shot, every People magazine cover. No, but I think if your two books had a representation on TV, and of course The Prisoner is very good, I guess I would also say Twin Peaks, but I think today, wouldn't it be Stranger Things?
It's definitely up there, and that's why I included it, because it was such an homage to the 80s. I felt like it needed to be there since a pretty hefty dose of influence in Esoteric Hollywood is 80s, both in part 1 and 2. And yeah, I think, this is consciously, referencing MK Ultra. It's consciously referencing Gnostic ideas. I think it's self-consciously referencing, interacting with the spiritual realm from from here and the now to the beyond. So there's a lot of interesting. You could argue about the execution aspects of season 2. I think we're a little poorly executed.
Agreed.
I felt that season 1 was pretty excellent. It even though again it is an homage. Not every homage is bad. I mean, Donnie Darko is an excellent homage to the 80s, and I grew up in the 80s, so that's kind of my growing up decades, why I'm partial to it. But yeah, I felt like Stranger Things should be there, especially given also the Dave McGowan type of stuff, because with Winona Ryder, there's actually a direct connection to all of that manufactured hippie scene, because her godfather was Tim Leary. So
really, I didn't know that. Wow.
So there's some weird connections there, and yeah, it's it annoyed a lot of people, I guess, because it was so, let's just redo Spielberg. And you kind of had J.J. Abrams already doing that. Like J.J. Abrams for the 2000s was already repackaging Spielberg stuff. Not that it was all bad. I thought some of it was well done. The second Cloverfield was a really good movie. They did that perfectly. First one you could debate. But anyway, yeah, I'm not sure what else I could say on Stranger Things other than it just made sense to have it there, and because it was so popular, and now we've got, season 3 coming that I think is going to be pretty popular as well.
Yeah, I think, what do you see? It almost seems, and many people told me this, even before I watched both seasons, but it seems like somebody made some changes or talked to the two brothers, because somehow in season 2, the CIA and the creepy Matthew Modine and everything just goes away, and you've got a kind Paul Reiser, and the MK Ultra kind of goes away. I mean, do you think sometimes the government steps in and says, you got to cool this down, guys?
Yeah, absolutely they do, especially if it's something that attains blockbuster status. And I would say that's pretty popular. I mean, it's Netflix, so I don't guess it's necessarily a blockbuster, but that's applicable to TV shows. And so, as to whether that for sure has happened, I don't know, but, they made it was very heavily, MK Ultra right away, deep state. We're talking about, human experiments. We're talking about, Stanford research style, remote viewing type of stuff. That's all very real. And then it kind of shifts into, in season 2, this, feminist type of thing where she's, got powers. And I know that there's some of that in the 80s, and that's kind of an ET type of thing. Elliot has powers. I think that's very possible, but I don't know if for sure that's what happened. But yes, if your stuff gets really popular, I mean, that's what they'll do. They'll come in, they'll buy it. They'll buy it from you, or they'll say you need to do this, or you can definitely get that knock on the door for sure.
Yeah, or knock it off. So then they went to the the H.P. Lovecraft plot and all this other thing. So we'll see what happens in the third one. So, and you mentioned A Child of the 80s on one too. You say, for example, that the 80s cheap sci-fi was just very good at predicting things. And of course, you talk about Tron, 1982 Tron, that it's probably more accurate than 2001 A Space Odyssey. That's what you wrote. Why do you think happened? Do you think, I don't know, were the boomers coming down from their drugs, or what was going on?
Well, Tron, I think, had a special relationship with Disney. So, and Disney is definitely deep state. The CIA helped Walt get the land and set it up. And then not too long after that, it became an experiment for the smart cities of the future. I mean, that's what Epcot is. Epcot is the planned community of the future. It's the, eugenics-based, biometric, that's what Epcot is. And that's why Disney has pioneered a lot of these things like mass biometric scanning to get in. The Siemens Corporation has been there from the get-go. Well, not from the get-go, but for many years. The get-go of Epcot, I should say, with putting out a lot of these experiments. I mean, GMOs, all that stuff. If you go and you go through the stupid Chiquita banana ride, all it is propaganda for austerity and GMOs and population reduction. So you're literally, you're at the heart of the ideological nexus point of the deep state when you're at Disney World. And a lot of people don't know that still, but that's what it always was. This isn't something that, it got taken over. I mean, certainly it's gotten worse than it used to be, but in terms of degeneracy. But no, it was always been intended to be that. It was always to be set up as an experiment.
Yeah, I remember Philip K. Dick going for the first time in Disneyland and freaking out when he saw the robots and everything. He said, "This is a simulacrum, and this is the future." So,
is that right? I didn't know that. Wow. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's right.
Yeah, I think you even write in your book how Dick and a few others, Elon Musk, and a small band of people are always saying, look, technology, robots, AI, this is bad, and we're going to keep warning you. Whether you listen or not, we'll see.
Yeah, exactly. I've been thinking, actually, because I went to Disney, when was that? Some months ago, 6-7 months ago, because I haven't made it yet, but I've got all the footage and all that. I'm going to do a little video report on that, because I wanted to go back and see, it had been a long time since I was there, but, what are we looking at here? What is this? Why is this here? I mean, obviously it's not just money, and it's not just, they're going to experiment on people that come to the parks. That's all part of it, but what is the end goal? Well, one thing I noticed was that they are planning to build what looks to be like the biggest Disney ever, in China. And I thought that was very, very telling, because if you go to Epcot, they have like, it's a small world after, and you walk around and they have all the little versions of all the cultures. And then in Chinaland, or whatever it's called, there's a display of this just massive, like, phenomenal looking, I mean, relatively speaking, it looks pretty amazing what they plan to build.
Really?
And all of these other new rides that they plan to have, and these new worlds that they plan to have. And the Disney here too is expanding, obviously, to, for example, they're about to unveil Star Wars World. They just built Pandora World. What does this mean? Well, I believe that, and that's one of the reasons I included Westworld in the book, is that if you've been paying attention to Westworld, we're being given this pretty popular HBO show that's preparing us for this. They're going to have huge, large-scale theme park type things where you role play as part of your theme park experience. That's what Westworld is. That's going to be real. I'm not saying you're going to be like killing people, but it kind of goes crazy in Westworld. But that's just to make you interested in it. And I tend to think that one of the ways that they'll get people into the smart city dystopia is that it's going to be a theme park. You're going to, in the future, I think people will group themselves according to their interests, your heritage, where you come from. None of that's going to matter. What will matter is your interests. And, are you part of a hacker group? Are you part of a political group? Are you part of a LARPing group where you go out in the park and you dress up like Renaissance people? You'll have a world where you can go be in, and you can opt into that. But the opt-in is going to be that it's all surveilled. You're controlled. They tell you what you do. They'll basically own you. But yes, you can live in your fantasy world that will be part of a theme park. I think theme parks are going to expand to be the dystopia.
Wow, that is grim. False realities within false realities. And a lot of this is the whole bread and circus thing, right? Let's entertain you to death.
It's the ultimate one, because people will choose the synthetic over the real, because one of those, Gregory Bateson, I think, is the guy, the MKUltra doctor, who said that the key to controlling men is to control their imagination, to capture the imagination. Well, what's their logo? It's all about the imagination, right?
That's it.
So the Magic Kingdom is going to be the chains that will bind you. Not just Disney. I mean, obviously, there could be, they seem to be buying everything, but there could be,
just bought Fox. Jesus.
Brands. It doesn't really matter what the brands are, but, look at geek culture, look at nerd culture, look how fantasy has taken over. What are all the blockbusters? They're comic book movies. This has kind of taken over. And how appealing will that be when I'm not talking about next year. I'm saying, 20, 30, 40 years from now, when they unveil these, giant continent. Maybe not really a continent, but imagine if there was a theme park that had everything you could think of. Tomorrow World, maybe Disney was telling us something about Tomorrow World. And it was, like the size of a state. Could you imagine that? Wouldn't that be crazy? But how many dupes would opt into that? Quite a few.
That's pretty grim. And Like I said, it must be hard learning this. When I wanted to ask you too.
Well, that's speculation. I
think
I'm speculating. If I was to do, I don't want to give anybody steal my ideas, but if I did a dystopian thing, it wouldn't be like Westworld. It would be like, like the future is just a bunch of theme parks and everybody lives in a different little theme park and and you can't tell what's fake and what's real. That would be kind of my premise for my sci-fi show.
Oh, that'd be cool. I might have to modify Jay Dyer's Dystopia a little bit in my head, but it's still pretty grim. And when we had once Robert Sullivan, who wrote similar books to yours, he called Cinema Symbolism, where he breaks down and all that. And he said it's not as fun as you might think. He just doesn't sit there and eat popcorn, but he sits there with the Blu-ray. He puts it in. A movie might take 6 hours, and it's back and forth. Is that the same way when you do it? Is it just a lot of work?
It is, yeah. I mean, the work is pretty much taken over. Maybe once a week I'll watch something for leisure, but pretty much anything I'm watching, it's for analysis purpose, and it gets. Now, if it's a TV series, it doesn't get like 2 or 3 viewings. But any movie, if there's going to be an analysis, it gets at least 2 or 3 viewings. Yes, I take notes. I have stacks and stacks of notebooks. And then you kind of pick out, well, is this worth a video? Is it worth a written analysis? You kind of have to experiment and play with it and see. And eventually, it kind of branched out. It was esoteric analysis of kind of esoteric movies, and then it kind of branched out into, well, I could also talk about movies that relate to espionage and Cold War and conspiracy. And, so there's a lot of different ways you can cut it, but, the bread and butter still seems to be, the kind of the conspiracy type of stuff. That's what people find most fascinating, the eyes wide shut style stuff. So, anytime you can find a movie like that, you've got a winner. Like I did a video analysis of Eye of the Devil, which is a film that I had never seen, and somebody mentioned it to me maybe a year ago, 6 months ago. They said, hey, go watch Eye of the Devil with Donald Pleasence. And sure enough, it turns out, this is basically Eyes Wide Shut 30 years before. And I think the film didn't do that great. It's worth watching though. It's a neat story. It's not as intense as Eyes Wide Shut, but it's definitely got a creepy vibe to it. It's kind of like a cult, in a French village, if you've never seen it, and they kind of lure in their prey. And that video did really good just because, that anything of that vein is very appealing. But sometimes you'll do an analysis and you think, oh, this is gold. Everybody's going to love this. Or like I could put if you put like 50 hours into a prisoner analysis and you put it up, and it's not, nobody knows about the prisoner, right? But they see, Eyes Wide Shut, that's got a lot of, nudity and butts and stuff in it. So let me click on that. What's that about? Yeah. So that's how it goes.
And you always said, I've heard you say many times, if the beginning of to understand this is really Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut, right there. You can get the plot, you can get the symbolism.
Yeah, well,
great starting point.
They say all the time, like, well, what's the movie I need to see? And I mean, if I were to pick one that kind of encapsulates the thesis of my books, it really can't beat that one.
As we end here, Jabe, so what are you working on next, or what are you doing next besides the the Designing Women book?
Well, we did a full episode of Hollywood Decoded, so that went. I was happy with what turned out of the first season of a TV show. If you haven't seen my show, Hollywood Decoded, it's a full production TV show. You can watch it at Gaia TV. It is subscription based. I don't own the rights to the show. It's not mine, even though Jay Widener and I worked together to conceive it. He's kind of got it going, and we collabed on that last year. It turned out really cool. Check out those 19 episodes if you want to watch the TV show. And now there is a new TV show in the works. So we have a sizzle reel done, and it's currently kind of being shopped around, and, fingers are crossed that the TV show will get bought. If so, if it does get picked up, we'll be doing 10 episodes of that. Hopefully it will. Don't know. But that'll be on the plate next if that gets bought. And more videos, more well, I've been kind of branching out and doing more comedy, been doing more I've upgraded the camera. I got better equipment now. So, we're going to be trying to do some better high production value type of stuff, and not as cheeseball type stuff. And we'll be talking in, just kind of continuing the Globalism book series, continuing, the film analyses. I've turned out a ton of film analyses in the last several months. So there's quite a few of those that you can look at in the sense of videos. Like I've kind of moved. Now what I'm doing is if I write, it's going to go directly into the book. I'm not going to just churn out free articles. I feel like I've kind of established myself, as a writer where I don't have to just churn out free articles. And I'm enjoying making videos, so I'm going to try to perfect that and then stick the writing into a book. It'll be, I guess, either part 3 or I might write on something different.
Awesome. Well, we look forward. And for the audience, where they can find out more about your dealings and stuff.
Yeah, just go to jaysanalysis.com. You can purchase the books there. I have to add, though, that the first printing of Esoteric Hollywood 2 has sold out. So
awesome.
It's back. Yeah, thank you. It's back ordered at the printer until I think early May. So May 1st or so, we'll have more copies of Hollywood or Esoteric Hollywood 2. But you can still get part 1, and I don't think there's any on Amazon either. I think the Amazon ones are about to sell out. But you can get the first one, and you can subscribe to Jay's Analysis, get access to all of my archives and talks and all that stuff, and follow me on my YouTube.
Wonderful. Well, there you have it, audience. And, to end, Vance, thanks for being with us in this cinematic episode.
Oh, my pleasure, Miguel. And Jay, it's great to hear about your work, and good luck. Keep up the good fight there, and show us all what Hollywood's really up to.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it very much. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Really appreciate it, and good luck with everything.
All right.
And there you have it, my beloved Truth Seekers. The first part of our interview with Jay Dyer on his book, Esoteric Hollywood 2. So many movies and archons behind them, yet so little Saturn. But we continue in our second part. On a lighter note, all 3 of us discuss some of our favorite movies, or at least the movies that we never get tired of. You might be surprised. Then we get intense, and Jay talks much more about transhumanism and its vileness. He also shares about the perils and no opportunities of AI, and how it manifests in such movies as the Terminator series. We change gears a bit, and Jay discusses some of his Greek Orthodox views, including how Sophia, or wisdom, falls into this tradition, and much more. As mentioned and as a bonus, Vance and I had a post-interview chat on Jay's research and findings, talking about our own views on movies and the forces behind them. Many have asked me, who is this mysterious moondog? So additionally, it was an opportunity for the Abraxas Chicken Wing Man to share his captivating story into the esoterica and his spiritual hitchhiking. I think you'll enjoy it. For the full infernal enchilada, please become a member or patron at Patreon. I can't do it without you, because, like Jay, I'm an independent media figure who hasn't sold out in a world of soulless mass media and heavily programmed whore replicants. So please support to keep this red pill cafeteria open. It costs next to nothing to help on every lunar cycle. Please go to, you got it, thegodabovegod.com for means to become a member or patron at Patreon, or simply message me. Don't forget that if you've got holes in your pockets due to the monkey shine of archons, I'll be glad to give you any full show on the burning house. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being yourself, your true self. Hello and goodbye as always.